Yeah, for me, it really started when I was about 6 years old. I just happened to be taken to a performance. And at the time, my mum was a teacher and working at a university. And that afternoon, they had a performance. And I was there, and I just fell in love with the theater. And it was theater. I think it was a regular play. But what I didn't know was that I was sat next to the director, and I can be quite animated, and God knows what my face was doing. But I remember my mum said, the director after the show said, your boy is in love with the theater, and I really was. It was really such a moment for me, and although my family are not from an arts background, after seeing that show, I asked my parents if I could go, and so I went to a kind of theater school where they did dance and theater and everything. And then ballet sort of took over. The more I did, the more ballet became really the focus for me. And then somehow when I was 14, I auditioned for the Royal Ballet School. And at 14, I left home. I went to the Royal Ballet School, met some of my closest friends there, and for the first time surrounded by people who also loved what I loved. And that was a really incredible experience for me. And then I continued my studies in London, and it evolved from there. I mean, that's very nice. I don't know. I love what I do, and I believe in ballet and what I do, and so it's very nice to receive comments like that. But also responsibility to live up to that. So I take it with a pinch of salt. Founding my own company and the collective it was really always a dream, and it was something I thought a lot about. At the time, I was doing a project in New York, and I was really amazed by just how it seemed like different artists came together to create new work, and I sort of wondered why we couldn't do a little bit more of that in the UK. And so I decided to go for it and launch the company really as a way to bring together artists from different fields, design, costume, dancers from different companies, as well as independent dancers, just to create new work and try to evolve the ballet language and the ideas. And it's been an amazing experience so far. Originally, we were about to launch our first kind of production just when the pandemic hit. And so after all of that work, fundraising, choreographing, bringing everything together, that was really quite a difficult moment. And then I used the pandemic and a year later to continue to fundraise. And then in 2021, we finally had our first production, which was amazing. And since then, we've performed at the Royal Opera House in London. We've toured to France. So it's been an incredible journey, and still much, much more to come. I'm very ambitious for what I want to do. But it's been amazing, like directing it as well, not just choreographing my own work, but bringing in different artists, leading on that side of things has been an incredible. Yeah, I think one thing that's always consistent is music is very much a driving force. And that's one of the reasons why we recently just launched a project called Composition and Configurations, which is about bringing together composers and choreographers to experiment, test, create new work. Because I really believe that what happens with the future of music, the future development of music, is inherently linked with what will happen with the future of ballet. If we think about some of the ballets that have endured and last for a long time, they all have amazing music. And I think it's a really exciting moment for music with technology and everything that we've got to explore. So that's definitely a driving force always. And the individual artist. One thing that's so amazing about the collective, or traveling and working as a freelance choreographer, is I get to meet really brilliant people. And that's one thing that I love about choreographing. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in how they respond to ideas that I might put out in the room. And then it becomes a dialogue, and I'm learning and exploring at the same time. So for me, that's at the heart of all of what I'm doing. Yeah, well, I think it is, because so in this case, here in Portugal, this is my first creation for the company. And of course, when you first go in, you don't necessarily know the dancers or the environment. So that's kind of why I give the analogy of a blind date, and you kind of sort of go open to discovering what might be there and how we might work together. So it's the unknown that's kind of simultaneously super exciting and a little bit terrifying. And it's that moment which I love. I think it's always evolving. I think, the more I create now, the more I often think about, usually there's something that comes up in the process that maybe I wasn't able to achieve in that piece, or, often you see the final ballet right at the end of the process, and then you see things that, oh, maybe next time I'd change that, or I want to see if I can explore that. So I think it's like an iterative process. And so, I'm sure in the next ballet that I create, there'll be things here that I learned or thought that I want to explore in another way. Upstream came about, well, firstly because I worked with Carlos Prado, the director, in Antwerp at the Royal Ballet Flanders, and he was in the studio with me, and it was really an amazing process. So I've known Carlos for a little while, and actually also seen the company on and off, because I often come to Lisbon just for holidays. And so when Carlos took over as director, he invited me, which was amazing. And I think the idea for Upstream, Peter's music, Peter Gregson's music was there quite early on. And, for me, there's something about his music that invites dance. It feels like, it often reminds me of nature and these very kind of specific landscapes. And Yaron, who is the lighting designer, I had a lot of early conversations with him, and we were just sharing images and ideas and this kind of underwater world and these kind of blues and this liquid quality and this idea of being submerged kind of came up for us, and that sort of became the starting point in terms of like the world that we were trying to build. I think, so in terms of the design, I guess an obvious example would be like the ideas of reflection. So at the back of the stage, there is a kind of reflective material which creates these reflections and very much puts us in that world of being kind of underwater and submerged. But it also is reflected in the costumes. Helena created these beautiful costumes which are almost like a wave, sort of caught frozen in time. So I think those ideas are reflected through the lighting, the costume. Choreographically, there's a fluidity to the movement. This kind of feeling of like losing and finding each other. So hopefully that's kind of the through line through all of those different elements. So I've worked with Peter Gregson's music before, and for me there's something very appealing because it creates a sense of a world, but it also feels like there's space for the dance as well. And my test for music often is that I kind of live with it for quite a while. And if it's something that I keep coming back to and keep being curious by, then that usually gives me the confidence to select it for creation, and then I start to work with it. But I think in this case, it felt like it was aligned with this kind of idea of being underwater and submerged and this kind of expansive landscapes. And it gave a really nice structure to the piece in terms of where we start and where we arrive at the end. It feels very cohesive, and gives space. And I think, as I was saying about, when it's a new creation or a blind date, there's something very appealing about, in that case, where the music has space to kind of be open to the surprise in the process, to be able to adapt and see what comes about during the studio time with the dancers, and let that also inform and shape what the piece becomes. What I've really, really enjoyed about this process is that originally I came in November, and I had, I think, 2-3 weeks in November, which was amazing because that was really, to me, felt like a time where we could kind of play and discover and get to know each other a little bit. And in this case, I came in with a little bit of a phrase to kind of put some vocabulary and a bit of a signature out in the room, and also as a way to get to know them and for them to get to know me. And then as we start to build trust, then it becomes a little bit more of a dialogue, and they kind of propose things, even just, you know, physically, or how they respond to ideas or movement ideas. And then it kind of builds and evolves in that way. You know, it's so funny. I walked outside of the front of the theatre last week and I saw the poster, and I saw, you know, Balanchine, McNicol and Forsythe, and it kind of took my breath away for a second, because these are two absolute, you know, gods and idols. So it's amazing to be in the same program as them. Also a little bit, you know, still kind of processing that, because it feels like quite a big deal. But I think what's interesting is it feels like 3 different generations. And there's something, I think, interesting as a program about having those 3 different perspectives. I think all 3 pieces definitely honor and utilize the classical vocabulary in different ways. I think all 3 pieces are also underpinned by a deep connection with the music. So that's definitely inherent, yeah. People, I'm curious about what moves people, what motivates people. I read quite a lot. I also find I'm traveling quite a lot, so I live quite a nomadic life. And, you know, there's something about that, you know, that beautiful thing when you're traveling and your phone isn't on because maybe you're in midair, but you're in motion, but everything's still. So I do find that I have quite a few, you know, windows of time to be quite self-reflective and just absorb what's going on in the world. That often informs how I think about things. And nature, I always find myself coming back to, I mean, one thing I've loved here about Lisbon is being so close to the water. That seems to be a recurring theme and important to me, this moment of time. I mean, I think they should be front and center. I think, you know, my life has been absolutely transformed in the most amazing way, beyond anything I could have imagined for myself, because of the arts, because of ballet. It's introduced me to some of the most incredible people I know. It's shaped how I see and think about the world and how I want to show up in the world. So, you know, I have experienced firsthand how transformation, you know, we always use this word transformational, but it's real. And, you know, I think it's the reason why, you know, it's the reason why to live, why to wake up, because we have the arts. They, you know, they help us to dream, they help us to connect more deeply with ourselves, with each other, and they help us to remember things that are significant and important in shaping who we are as people. I don't know anything more important than having the arts. And often when I talk to people about this, they imagine life without, you know, whatever arts means for you, whether it's the theater or dance, or imagine life without music, imagine life without Netflix. You know, it would be so dull. So I think it's important because it brings vibrancy, it brings connection. You know, for me, there's something still so sacred almost about sharing space and time in a theater. So in like we will next week, you know, 1,000 people in the same space experiencing this thing which will only exist in the moment. I mean, that's that moves people in a way that I think is maybe sometimes underestimated, but that can really influence and shape how people see themselves, each other, or to escape for a moment in time. I think it's important for all of those reasons.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.